Good morning, everyone. Welcome to CLAD News Brief. Today is September 14th, Wednesday. Today's news brief, we want to cover first mortgage interest rate review and suspected South Korean suicides support calls for change. And the next news is average mortgage rate rises to 5.89%. And the next, inflation expectations declined in August. The next news is home listing price started lowering. The next, inflation slows for second month, but still high. The next one is 3% down mortgage program expanded. The last one is Goldman Sachs to cut hundreds of jobs. Okay, so let's take a look at first this week's mortgage interest rate review. 30-year fixed rate went up 5.750. Again, this week is all red. I believe 3 consecutive weeks we see all red, meaning it keeps going up. And 15-year, 4.875, and FHA, 5.5, and 10-year Treasury yield went up to 3.427, and 5-year ARM, 5.750, and right now it's pretty much the same, actually same as a 30-year fixed mortgage. Is kind of abnormal situation, and 7-year ARM also 5.875. So this week is I think almost the third week to see this upward in terms of mortgage rate. So let's take a look at each different news. Well, suspected South Korean suicides support calls for change. This news is reported on the Wall Street Journal, by the way, on the September 8th, last Thursday. And in a small, very tiny apartment in one of cities, Suwon, nearby Seoul, it's a family suicide. And the mother in her 60s, suffering from cancer, and her 2 daughters in their 40s had incurable illness. They all committed suicide. And as we know, South Korea has grown in recent decades to be the world's 10th largest economy. And we know the Korea became export powerhouse and technological leader and cultural trend maker, like BTS, like many other movies, O징어 Game, for instance. So it created a hyper-competitive society and social inequity and winner-takes-all mentality contribute to the death of poor families. It's kind of irony. Korea is doing super in one end, but also if we look at the suicide rate, it is very pitiful. South Korea's suicide rate of 25.7 deaths per 100,000 people, I believe is in a year or annual stats. And it is highest in OECD. OECD is Organizations for Economic and Cooperation and Development, Economic Cooperation and Development. It's totally the member of this OECD is 38 countries. And among these OECD countries, the Korea's suicide rate is highest, which is number 1, which means more than double the average of 11. So OECD countries, the average suicide rate is 11 per 100,000 people, but Korea is 25.7 deaths per 100,000 people. So why this is happening? And then it needs some change in terms of social spending. Of course, we call it a social, what do we call this? A social net. So there are a lot of funds allocated to help these poor families and there's people with some difficulties, but somehow this kind of suicides happen, and there is some problem, and definitely there are some holes in the social net, a safety net, we call social safety net. And this is, of course, ongoing problem, the social inequity, the gap between the rich and the poor is widening more and more. And again, it's Korea becomes a very hyper-competitive society, and winner takes all mentality is contributing to this kind of situation. So Wall Street Journal, a pretty good size of article reported on September 8th. 그 한국의 지금 자살률을 늘 우리가 알고 있지만 이번에는 월스트리트 저널에 꽤 큰 지면을 이용해서 리포트가 된 기사가 8일 날 떠서 잠깐 소개를 드리는데, 지금 자살률이 그 OECD 38개 국가 중에서 38개 국가의 에버리지 자살률이 11년 애뉴얼이겠죠. 1년에 10만 명당 11명이 자살을 하는데 한국은 가장 높아서 OECD 중에서 가장 높아서 25.7입니다. 그런 지금 뉴스가 들어와 있는데 수원의 조그만 아파트에서 60대 된 어머니, 그 다음에 40대 된 딸 둘이 전부 다 병 들어가지고 다 자살을 그냥 해버렸다. 그래서 이제 문제는 그 소셜 세이프티 넷이 무슨 문제가 있느냐. 그 넷 소셜 네트 구멍이 너무 커서 글로 다 빠져서 떨어지는 뭐 그런 상황이 되는 것이 아닌가. 한편 월스트리트 저널에서는 한국이 이제 그 표현했던 대로 엑스포트 파워하우스고 테크놀로지컬 리더고 전 세계에서, 그리고 cultural 트렌드 메이커인데 그래서 결국은 전 세계에서 10번째 가는 경제 대국임에도 불구하고 굉장히 하이퍼 컴피티티브한 소사이티가 되며 가고, 그 다음에 소셜 이니퀄리티, 빈부차가 커지고, 그 다음에 winner takes all, 그러니까 남겨두는 게 없어요. 위너가 다 가져가는 그런 멘탈리티 때문에 이러한 문제들이 지금 야기되고 있지 않느냐라고 보도한 아티클이 있어서 잠깐 리포트 해드립니다. Okay, the next news is come back to our reality in US. Average mortgage rate rises to 5.89%. As we reviewed in the beginning, mortgage rate. And now it's Freddie Mac. Again, now you know Freddie Mac. Now you are very, close to this organization. Freddie Mac's this week's survey guide said the average rate on 30-year fixed rate mortgage rose to 5.89. They surveyed, okay, and it is topping an all-year high from June. So it went up from June again. And right now, housing market is the key focus for the Fed because rising costs there are a major component of this year's sky high inflation. And so right now, mortgage rate touched their highest level in nearly 14 years this week. So it's pretty high. And so buyer frenzy of last year dissipated because of this mortgage rate, bringing supply and demand back to closer balance. Well, this is again still our hope, but reality is still not perfectly balancing yet. 오케이, 이번 주에 이자가 제일 지금 14년 만에 지금 제일 높게 올라가서 5.89, 프레디 맥에서 조사한 서베이에 하면 5.89%까지 올라갔다. 그래서 물론 지금 하우싱 마켓이 인플레이션에 끼치는 영향이 가장 중요한 키 인플루언서가 되기 때문에 페드에서 지금 계속 이것을 이제 워치하고 있는데, 물론 페드 입장은 다른 전반적인 인트레스트를 더 올려서 이제 인플레이션을 잡겠다고 하는 거죠. 인플레이션 뉴스 조금 이따 더 하겠지만은 그래서 조금은 이제 너무 그 과열되는 모기지 마켓을 조금 식혀가고 있지 않나. 그래서 서플라이 앤 디맨드가 밸런스를 만들어 가게끔 하고 되는 것이 아니냐 하는 예상을 하고 있다, 이런 얘기죠. Okay. The next news is inflation expectations decline in August. Where there is actual inflation statistics, the numbers, but also there is a index, some sort of index of inflation expectation. Let's take a look at it. American consumers said in August that they are expecting notable declines in future levels of inflation. Okay, future levels of inflation, meaning the survey of consumer expectation that 1 year from now, in other words, people's expectation for next year this time, what would be the inflation rate? Okay, that's what we're talking about. So households see inflation at next year, 1 year from now, they expect at 5.7%. Okay, in August, but July they expected 6.2% or 1 year later inflation. So it's actually came down. In June, the expectation after 1 year, it was 6.2, but August, it was 5.7%. Now, what about 3 years from now? Okay, 3 years from now, people's inflation expectation, it came down to 2.8% in August, but it was 3.2% in July. So their expectation after 1 year or after 3 years, both came down. That's what this report says. Believe that public's expected path of inflation exert sort of influence, a strong influence on where price pressure levels stand now. Again, we said economy is psychology. So it's important that what people are thinking of about the inflation, about the economy, etc. So let's take a look at some chart. This year 2020, 2021, 2022, and this sort of blue line is 1 year. So 1 year after, what would be the year expected inflation rate? Okay, so it was kind of low, and after 2021, it starts climbing up. This is a 1 year future expectation of inflation. And it was really like a June, July was high. Okay, 1 year later, the inflation becomes 6.8%. But finally in August came down to 5.7%. Then what about 3 years later, the people's inflation expectation, and it went down to 2.8%. Okay, so the expectation 1 year later, inflation will be 5.7, came down, and 3 years later, inflation will be 2.8%, also came down. So the people think that it's going to be okay. 1 year later, and 3 years later, pretty much 2% level, which the Fed wants desperately, about 2% inflation rate. 그 inflation expectation, 그러니까 기대 지수라는 것이 이제 또 있어서 또 통계를 내는 기관들에서는 예를 들어서 Federal Bank of New York 같은 데서 이제 리포트를 내놨는데 Survey of Consumer Expectation이라는 지수를 내놓고 있는데 뭐냐면 심플하게 사람들이 1년 뒤에는 인플레이션 레이트이 몇 퍼센트가 될 거라고 하는 예상치죠. 그런데 그 예상치가 줄라이에서 오거스트로 넘어오면서 떨어졌다. 줄라이는 6.2%, 오거스트에는 5.7%. 그러면 3year 앞으로 가면 3년 뒤에는 어떻게 될 것이냐도 같이 지금 떨어졌다. 그래서 줄라이에는 3.2%였는데 오거스트에는 2.8%다. 그래서 Fed에서는 지대한 관심을 가지고 있다. 왜냐하면 이 경제는 쉽니다. 이런 얘기를 많이 하죠. 그러니까 사람들이 생각하는 것에 따라서 영향을 줄 수 있기 때문에 인플레이션 자체도 그래서 많은 관심을 이러한 인덱스에 관심을 가지고 있다 그런 거였고요. 차트 한번 보여드렸고, okay, and the next news is finally, well, I would say finally, home listing price. Okay, listing price started coming down just a bit. And according to Redfin, U.S. average sold price became lower than average listing price for 4 weeks in August straight. So sold price was 99.8% of listing price, while it was 101.4% a year ago, which means 1.6% lower. So it's a possibly now we are going through inflection point. Inflection point in Korean is 변곡점. That's a point that it's changing the direction, I would say. So obviously mortgage rate increase and makes weak demand for buyers and then makes lowering listing prices and becomes inflection point in residential market. That's kind of speculation. Okay. Still, 37 of the transactions were going through bidding war among buyers in August, but it came down from 50% a year ago. So about a year ago, the 50% of home buyers had to go through bidding war, but now is 37% in August. And still the median price in July in US is $403,800. It is actually up 10.8% from a year ago. So still a home price going up, okay, from compared to a year ago. Okay. But it used to be like, like 18%, close to 20%. But now it came down to increase rate is only now 10% from a year ago. 그 레드핀에서 조금 이제 레드핀은 부동산 일종의 통계 회사죠. 뭐 리스팅도 하긴 하는데 뭐 요새는 리스팅 잘 못 보는 것 같아요. 아무튼 이제 통계로 이제 많이 내놓게 되는데 통계 내놓은 게 이제는 sold price가 average sold price가 average listing price보다 약간 밑으로 떨어졌다. 그런 통계를 내놨는데 숫자적으로 99.8%다. 리스팅 프라이스에. 그런데 1년 전에는 그게 101.4%였다. 그러니까 조금 높았죠. 리스팅을 내놓으면 그거보다 좀 높게 팔렸는데 이제는 조금 밑으로 내려갔다. 그래서 모기지 렛이 올라가고 디맨드가 약해지면서 리스팅 프라이스를 조금씩 떨구는 그러한 현상이 이제 어떤 시장의 변곡점, 체인지되는 디렉션이 체인지되는 변곡점을 지나가고 있지 않나. 그러나 1년 전에만 해도 50%의 비딩 워가 있었고 바이어들 중에서 still August에 8월 달에 still 37%는 비딩을 해야만 집을 샀다. 이런 얘기고요. 그리고 still median price는 작년 대비 10% 정도 올라갔다. 이런 거죠. 줄라이에. 그래서 역시 median price는 지금 40만 3,800불에 도달했다. 그런 지금 통계가 나와 있고요. Okay, this is kind of good news. The record, today's newspaper reported that inflation slows for 2 consecutive months, but still high. The consumer prices surged 8.3% last month compared with a year ago. Okay, that means August. But July, it was 8.5%. And June, it was the record high, 9.1%. So June, 9.1%, and July, 8.5%, and August, 8.3%. So 2 consecutive months, inflation slowed down. Compared to a year ago, we're talking about these stats. At a monthly basis, prices rose 0.1%. In August, but in July it was a flat monthly base, and this inflation is higher than many Americans have ever experienced, escalating the family's grocery bills, rent, and utility costs, among other expenses. It really deepens gloom about the economy despite the strong job growth and low unemployment. So that's why it's kind of puzzles the economists right now, right? Strong job growth and low unemployment rate, but inflation is now looks like a little bit tapering down, but still compared to a year ago, it's 8% range. And of course, Republicans now is coming toward the election. And Republicans blame President Biden's $1.9 trillion stimulus package passed last year for much of the increase. This inflation caused by this stimulus package. That's what the Republican says. 그 2달 연속해서 지금 인플레이션 레이트이 1년 전 대비 늘어나는 인플레이션 레벨이 줄어들고 있다. 그래서 6월 달에는 1년 전 대비 9.1%가 인플레이션 됐는데 7월 달에는 8.5%, 그다음에 어거스트에는 그거보다 낮아져서 8.3%로 기록이 됐다. 그래서 2달 연속 지금 increase rate은 줄어들고 있다는 거고요. monthly base는 어거스트에 7월 대비 0.1%만 올라갔고 7월 달에는 6월하고 같았다. monthly base는. 그래서 지금 참 경험해보지 못한 많은 세대가 지금 살고 있는 경제 인구라고 그러죠. 경제 활동을 하는 그 세대가 경험하지 못했던 인플레이션을 지금 경험하고 있다. 그럼에도 불구하고 잡 마켓은 스트롱하고 하이어링이 많고 그다음에 그래서 low unemployment 실업률은 굉장히 낮은 상태에 있다. 그 상태에서 물가만 지금 올라가고 있다. 뭐 그런 거를 볼 때에 그러니까 다른 경제 구조는 괜찮은데 물가만 올라가는 것은 돈을 푸는 양이 많아서 그럴 거다. 그 바이든의 블레임을 하고 있는 그러한 공화당 측의 입장이다. 스티뮬러스 패키지로 1.9 트릴리언 달러를 풀었죠. 그것 때문에 지금 인플레이션이 계속 이렇게 올라가고 있다라고 지금 블레임하고 있다 하는 뉴스가 들어와 있고요. 오케이. 3% down mortgage program expanded. Two banks, Citibank initiated home run mortgage program, which 3% down payment program, and no PMI. Okay, even though it's below than 20%, still this program there's no PMI, but it is for like a low income and minority people in US in the major metropolitan areas, including New York too. I'm not sure about the New Jersey, any cities. And the low income guideline is 80% of average area's average family income, but extended to 120%. So still a little bit more people that can be qualified. And there is a website. And also Bank of America provides this program, Community Affordable Loan Solution with zero down payment. So that's attractive. Zero down means like a VA loan, no down payment for first home buyers. So that's the Bank of America. So if you have some young people who try to buy a house as a first home buyer or low income minority, then you may introduce this program to buy a home. 지금 3% 다운 모기지 다운 프로그램이 지금 출시되었다. 시티뱅크에서. 그래서 홈런이라는 프로그램 3% 다운이고 노 PMI다. 그리고 그것을 조금 더 늘려서 그 평균 인컴의 80%에 해당되는 사람들한테 적용시켰는데 이제 120% 되는 사람들까지도 적용시키고 있다. 웹사이트 인포메이션 되어 있고요. 그 다음에 또 시티뱅크도 하고 뱅크 오브 아메리카도 지금 커뮤니티 어포더블 론 솔루션 그래서 제로 다운 프로그램을 제공하고 있다. 퍼스트 홈 바이들에게 그런 뉴스가 지금 들어와 있고요. Okay, the last one is Goldman Sachs to cut hundreds of jobs. Well, Goldman Sachs had 47,000 employees on staff at the end of June, up from 41,000 a year earlier. So during a year time, they hired 6,000 employees, but now they start cutting the hundreds of staffers. And as soon as next week, this result came out their annual review, and they postponed this annual review during the pandemic, but now they reviewed. So they decide to lay off hundreds. We don't know exactly how many. But after record setting in 2021, then in 2021, it was good. The industry-wide slump on mergers and new IPOs has hit Goldman Sachs' bottom line this year. The second quarter investment banking revenue fell 41% from a year ago. That's a lot. And Goldman Sachs profit fell by nearly half in that period. They're talking about second quarter of this year, revenue and their net profit by pretty much half. So they concluded that they want to let people go. I don't know how many hundreds, but as soon as like next week. 골드만 삭스가 한 몇백 명이라는데 모르겠어요 정확하게. 하여튼 1000명은 안 되겠죠. 이제 레이오프를 시키게 됐다. As soon as, 그러니까 빠르면 다음 주부터. 골드만 삭스가 지금 토탈 인원이 4만 1000명에서 작년 1년 사이에 4만 7,000명까지 늘렸는데, 그리고 비즈니스가 2021년도는 아주 좋아갔는데, 올해 들면서 세컨 쿼터에 지금 레버뉴가 41% 줄었고, 그러니까 1년 전 대비, 당연히 1년 전에는 좋았기 때문에 그만큼 그게 차이가 또 보일 수도 있겠죠. 그리고 프로핏도 그 세컨 쿼터에는 반으로 반토막이 난 그러한 정도였다. 그렇게 보도가 지금 들어와 있습니다. Okay, that is pretty much the news brief of this week. I hope you enjoyed this news brief and grasp some the situation, what's going on in our industry in general. So thank you for joining again. See you all next week.